All right. Welcome to another episode of the Consistency Corner podcast, Unfiltered Fridays edition. And I'm really excited to have my friend Marin back on the show today, who was a guest early in the podcast. But she and I were chatting in the DMs about financial decisions and the weight maybe of making an investment decision sometimes has on us. And she's got an interesting perspective and framework. And so I wanted to have this conversation today on Unfiltered Fridays because in the online space, numbers get thrown around all over the place. And we hear, six-figure launches and 10K investments and five-figure investments and all these things. And we hear people talking about what they've invested in. And sometimes it makes us like in that comparison cycle. And then we start to think about our own business of like, okay, well, what am I supposed to be doing here? And a lot can go into those financial decisions. And I think it's also, we were just chatting before we hit record, and we'll get into this too, the idea of I can just do it myself. And if you're listening to this podcast, like I know you're a high achieving woman, you can do it. You can do a lot of things, but do you have the capacity? And what would saying yes to doing something yourself versus outsourcing, what is that going to do for your big picture goals? What is that going to do for your life? So those are the type of decisions that we're going to kind of talk through today. So Marin, thank you so much for being here. Welcome back to the podcast. Share
Thank you.
for those that are new here, a little bit about you and your business and what you do and your kind of entrepreneurial journey. I mean, that whole like, tell me your whole life in 2 minutes. Just give us a quick recap.
Yes. And it's so fun to be back here. I was just looking at the dates before jumping on 2 years later. And a lot has happened, I'm sure, for everyone, for sure, in these last 2 years. But yes, my current story and how I'm currently working with clients most is in this financial realm and financial coaching. I added my budget coaching certification to my repertoire last year. And the reason for that is because I was coaching for many years women on making empowered, authentic decisions in their life. That's probably what we talked about on last podcast when I was last on. And it's an amazing work, still very inspired by that work and happy to talk about that message. I have a book on that message on making confident decisions. And the through line that I saw either directly talked about or that was under the surface for so many of my clients was the financial piece. So even once we do the work to say, what do you want? How do you want to get there? Can we make this decision to take the leap or move across the country or change jobs or whatever it is, there always came this point when it was, but how does that look financially? Or like, okay, but it's just too scary once I think about the numbers that are involved. And so I got really passionate to make sure that I could support my clients and talk about this head on instead of trying to dance around the subject. So my background is in positive developmental psychology. That's my master's degree. And then I have my life coaching certification. And like I said, most recently, it's really been focused on that budget coaching certification, organizing our money based on our values so that when it comes to making confident decisions, not only do you have the mindset support, but you have the practical lens to look through to challenge any beliefs that may be hindering us or empower us on the flip side and really go forth and create the life that you're wanting to create.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the like practical application of money mindset with like actual budgeting and tools because you have to have both. You can
Yes.
read all the books and say all the affirmations all day long, but if we're not like clear on the facts with what the money is telling us, we're disconnected and out of alignment, right?
Totally. And vice versa too. And it depends on everyone's personality of where you typically lean. Because those also that come and say, well, I've been following a budget or I learned this system 5 years ago and I've been applying it to a T every single week. If they're still feeling afraid or like that scarcity mode of not being able to move forward or just feeling like analysis paralysis whenever it comes to making any sort of decision, whether it's coffee in the morning or what car you're going to get next, then that means we also need that mindset. So just to your point, we need both elements. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I remember listening to a financial coach recently, and she was talking about the difference in money mindset for an entrepreneur versus a non-entrepreneur. And she was like, don't get me wrong, like Dave Ramsey, I get it. What he teaches is helpful for a lot of people. But as an entrepreneur, you're in a position that you don't have a ceiling, that you can create new ways to create money. And so sometimes those spending decisions and those investment decisions, it's like, okay, well, if I spend this money, what's the return on investment? what could I make if I do spend it or if I don't? And I was having this conversation with my husband. So we were talking about my business budget, and like, full transparency, he doesn't look at my books. Like, my business is separate, but my business pays me, which helps fund our family, right?
Mhm.
So we're talking about my business budget, and I was talking about what I pay my coach. And he was like, "Well, when are you going to be done having a coach?" And I was like, "Never." I said, "That's an important investment for me because that helps me see the next step in the path. That gives me a mentor to lean on. That gives me an outside perspective. And the business is always going to be changing and growing and scaling. So I will always have some sort of mentor or coach that I'm paying. That doesn't go away." And that was just a completely different mindset for me to have with him from an entrepreneur versus a non-entrepreneur.
Yeah. Yeah. And that ceiling, again, back to depends on our personality, but I've also had interesting conversations with clients who are business owners, entrepreneurs, and again, depending on who you are, but there can be this rose-colored glasses phenomenon too of, well, there is no ceiling. Tomorrow I could be, suddenly land a client and then my everything changes.
Mhm.
And how do we play this dance of staying optimistic, knowing what you are capable of as a business owner and entrepreneur? And again, back to the books and the tangible numbers, to also stay real with ourselves and say, and this is current day reality of what's happening. So how do I make an informed choice, knowing
Mhm.
my potential, but also knowing what true risk or, not risk that is, and then make a truly holistically informed choice.
Yeah. So how do you, if somebody's in that kind of analysis paralysis and they see the shiny object or the thing that like their gut is telling them like, this could be really helpful, but I don't know if I should spend the money. Like, what are some of the steps that you walk people through to start to figure out what's the right decision?
Yeah. And my job, I've always seen this even when I was, general decision coaching, is that it's not my job to advise. I don't assume that I know better or know what is best for anyone. So it's really digging under and asking really powerful questions and really sitting in a space to help my client hear what they already know or what they will discover that's within them already. So asking the person in front of me if they're really stuck there, to first get a little feeler. Both, as we said, need to be involved, the mindset and the practical piece. But is this more of a mindset hang up or is this more of a practical hang up? If they're saying, I don't know if this, like, can I afford this? And they're feeling really like, if they're already true in their gut that this feels like a good decision for them, they want to go forward with it, then we say, okay, well, can we open up your books? Can we, if we don't have that budget already, maybe that's our first step together to organize your money. And I want to clarify from the start too, when I'm talking about budget, because there are so many strings attached to that word, I really work with women who they probably have a good income. They probably have a good flow of money. And oftentimes these are the women who are making enough money where they haven't had to have a budget in the past. They haven't needed to end a paycheck to paycheck cycle, at least in this current season of their life. They're probably not too worried about debt, or they have a plan that they're paying it off. And so this is more about, how are we organizing our money? Do we even have a sense of where that money is going or how that money is flowing? So when I say budget, I don't mean we need to pinch pennies and we need to cut back on spending. It's more of, we need an awareness of where your money is, where it's going, and if that feels good for you, and if not, to make changes.
Yeah, I almost think of it more as like a financial plan than
Mm-hmm.
a budget. And it's almost like saying, what's your meal plan versus what's your diet? Like,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
language can be really powerful.
Yeah. And I've used the word spending plan too before.
Mhm.
Or like, yeah, your money flow. Let's just get organized with your money flow. So with
Mhm.
that client, if they're feeling stuck and it's more like, I know this is what I want, but I don't know if I can afford it. Let's open up the books and see how our money is flowing. And that might take a month or two.
Mhm.
And sometimes that's absolutely worth it. Or if they know, I'm pretty sure I can afford it. And if, depending on where they're at or what makes them feel okay, maybe they do take that step and they say, yes, we're going to go for it. And also, I want to get ahead of this for next time, or as we make this investment, to simultaneously get my books in order and make sure I know where money is flowing so that I can feel confident moving forward as well. And again, make sure that this investment isn't just doesn't continue to just be this, I think I'm okay, make it, take a risk and find out in the long run.
Yeah.
And on the flip, if someone is feeling that analysis paralysis and they're like, I don't know, I crunched the numbers, I've done it 10 times, I've done it in all these different ways, like they're really in that solid practical mindset, probably a really heady mindset, then
Mhm.
it's time to say, okay, well, let's take a step back from the numbers because you've already looked at it in 10 ways. How
Mhm.
is this feeling for you? Where is this coming from? Does it feel like a should? Did someone tell you you have to do this to be successful? Or are you genuinely called to this as something that you're wanting to move forward
Mhm.
with?
Mhm. Let's talk a little bit about opportunity cost
Mm.
because when we've got investment decisions, I really think of it as like there's two sides to the coin of if I spend this money, A, what am I not spending money on? Because, there might be a limited amount of funds that month or that quarter or whatever. But then if I don't spend the money, where's my time going? That kind of time for money. Talk me through kind of how to take all those really big concepts and maybe like distill them down to help you walk through those decisions.
Yeah. And before we hit record, we were talking about a lot of the people that we work with are those high achievers, go getters. And so, as you said right at the beginning, you're capable of whatever is in front of you. And likely you're capable to figure out, I mean, we have so much information at our fingertips, YouTube tutorials, and all the things that we can figure out a lot on our own. And sometimes we forget how much time, and not only time, but how much energy that takes as well. And so I think sometimes we can get really black and white with money and say either I spend the money and I'm losing an asset, or I don't spend the money and therefore I'm saving myself something. But we don't think about, but you're also then expending energy and time yourself. And so to once we add all those back onto the table, and not to say it's always the right decision to spend money, but just to get real with ourselves and say, okay, I'm choosing not to spend money. That means I'm choosing to spend my time and my energy in the next month to figure this thing out from scratch. And likely it's something that someone else, if we were thinking about hiring or delegating this out, they've already spent not only a month figuring that out, but probably years
Mhm.
figuring out everything behind whatever you're about to go toward. And again, not to assume there's a right or wrong answer there, but just to get that perspective back in our minds of this isn't just about spending money or saving money. This is about, do I spend money to hire an expert? Hopefully that they're advertising themselves correctly.
Mhm.
Or do I figure it out myself? And maybe that comes down to, it's not as important to you to have this be the thing for you. And I guess let's bring this down to earth for a second. I'll use myself as an example and a decision I've walked through with my own coach many times because it's always for me the shiny object. And
Mhm.
that is Instagram Reels and all the fun thing on social media. So there was a time recently where I was like, should I invest to hire someone to learn about, because yes, I could learn myself and I am learning regardless, but really learn how to use this opportunity to my advantage.
Mhm.
And it's expensive. It can get expensive to learn, especially marketing. That's just a higher price point in business ownership. And for me personally, at this season, this could change next season, but right now, my main focus is booking speaking events. And it's highly successful to get me clients and to keep my business running and profit margins at a place that I feel comfortable. And it just makes sense. And I'm really enjoying it. And
Mhm.
so when I brought up this, oh, maybe I should hire someone to also teach me about reels, my business coach was very smart and guided me to say, okay, well, let's look at your numbers, just like you guide your clients to all the time. And I
Mhm.
looked at where my clients come from, and it was like 10%, something pretty minor online. And granted, if I invested in someone who taught me reels, that number would increase. But at this very moment, is that what I need? Is that what I want? And it could be a different story if I was really like, yes, I have so much extra time. I want to spend it doing this, learning this, bringing this person on, doing the trainings. But that wasn't the case for me because I didn't want to spend the time or energy and the money in that realm. I think I
Yeah.
went on a little bit of a side tangent
Well,
there, but
I think
there's all those things to consider.
I think that's really interesting when it comes to education. And I think
Mhm.
a lot of us do this is we buy this course that we think is going to teach us how to do the thing, and it probably does. But are we willing to A, take the time to learn, B, take the time to practice, implement, make mistakes, get better, Or is it a better investment to hire someone to do it for you?
Mm.
I use this example with bookkeeping. I did my own books for 6 or 7 months very poorly. I tax time came around and it was a disaster. I had to spend days and days and days trying to clean things up and get things ready for the tax advisor. And so once I was able to hire a bookkeeper, it was like, yes, I'm going to just hire you to do this for me
Mhm.
versus me purchasing a course that would teach me how to be a better bookkeeper or, tutorials on bookkeeping and QuickBooks. I don't want to learn. I want you to do it for me.
Mhm.
Because my
Mhm.
energy isn't well served doing my bookkeeping. There's
Yeah.
other areas that are my zone of genius. And so that sometimes can be like a decision of, do I teach myself how to do this or do I have someone do it for me? Of what is doing that thing do for your energy?
Mhm. Well, even that makes me think of the things that we are already good at as well. So it makes me think of, um, it was probably 2 years ago now, but I was launching a new offer, and I've built my website from scratch and really enjoy doing that.
Mhm.
And I was on a little bit of a deadline with launching this new offer, and there was a website I wanted, or a page on my website that I wanted updated, and I I could have done it myself. And like I said, I actually quite enjoyed it. But looking at the amount of time I had, energy I had, and where as like, no one can replace me who's providing the offer, where
Right.
was my energy best spent? It was actually hiring someone out. And she did such a phenomenal job. And I would hire her in a heartbeat again if I was ever in that predicament or wanted a refresh on my website. And so
Mhm.
in that season, hiring out made sense for me too, for other reasons, not just because I didn't know how to do it or didn't enjoy it, because I did, but actually because I was looking at, again, the holistic picture, my time, my energy, and my money. Where's the best investment for me for all of those things? And then move forward from there.
Yes. And I think that's like what you just said, my time, my energy, and my money. And
Mhm.
that's the three things that we have to look at because we can't just look at one. We can't
Mhm.
just look at them in silos. And I think often that's the decision or that's the coaching that we're given. Well, do
Mhm.
you have the money? Well, do you have the time? Do you have the skills? Okay, but we've got to look at all three because they all
Mhm.
three intersect to build your life. And
Mhm.
for the
Mhm.
most part, most of us are building a business because we want it to fuel and fund the life that we dreamed of, right?
Mhm. Yeah, and energy is one. I just had an interesting conversation with someone who attended a workshop of mine, and he was trying to decide, which is also common with my clients, whether or not he wants to leave his full-time job to go all in with his current side hustle, but what he wants to be his full-time business. And he was saying theoretically, he has plenty of time because he clocks out of work at 5. He doesn't have, kids or anything to take care of at home. And so he should, in big quotes, have the time on nights and weekends to run what he needs to run or wants to run with his business until he feels even more comfortable with his financial cushion and all the other things involved to really
Mhm.
go all in with his business. But his current job is draining so much of his energy and soul and life that by the time he gets home, even on weekends, it takes 2 full days to like unwind, recover, and get up the courage to go back to work in the morning. And so that energy piece is one I like to add in too, of how does, even if this person wanted to continue making money or working a job, maybe there's a different job to work or a shift that he could make that where he's still working, and maybe the hours, the time, maybe even the finances don't change at all, but the
Mhm.
energy piece, it sounds like,
Yes.
really needs to change, in order, if he wants to have the energy and nights and weekends, or maybe that is the push to make the shift if he can, to really go all in with his business right now, not because he's lacking the time, but because he's lacking the energy.
Yes. And that is the thing about capacity that I
Hmm.
think as high achievers, we often don't realize that we do have a ceiling on our capacity. I mean, I think about like, growing in my career in corporate, it was like I was just always the yes person, always the doer. And then when I became a parent, it was like, whoa, now I have this whole other set of responsibility that is weighing on me mentally.
Mm.
And then you start to realize, like, I don't have the capacity to do everything. I
Mhm.
just don't. Nobody does. Nobody can do everything. You can do anything, but you can't do everything all at once.
Yeah, and there's so much conversation in the personal development space, and it's from a well-intentioned place, but there's so much about abundance mindset and positive thinking and
Mhm.
like where are you limiting yourself from your mind? Which again, I focus half of my work on. That is a large part of it. But there's also, and I've had specifically since helping women to organize their money and working with money specifically, there's this really powerful side of scarcity, the scarcity mindset and perspective. Not in a way of you're not going to have more and this is all you have and let's hold on to everything, time, money, energy, all the things. But from this place of this is actually what you have to work with in this moment.
Mhm.
That is a scarce number, not because it can't increase or change or won't, but because this is what is right now. And again, there has to be a balance of both because sometimes we can get too sucked into that and then forget that there's room to grow and change and other possibilities.
Mhm.
But yeah, to look at, okay, what is your, whether it's capacity, energy, time, money, all these elements, what is the edge right now for me? And then it almost creates this vacuum of empowerment to say, yeah, I only have 2 hours right now at my current capacity that I can full on focus. What project or activity or thing do I need and want to do within that constraint? And it helps us to be a little more real maybe with our time and
Mhm.
also make that choice that's the quote unquote smart choice for ourselves and for our businesses of this is the most important thing in this time, knowing that this is what I have right now. And
Mhm.
maybe there's a whole long yes later list, but in this moment with this capacity, what do you want and need to do?
Yeah, and I earlier you said something about the like shiny object syndrome, and
Mm-hmm.
that I always tell people in the marketing world, marketers are really good at selling marketing. That's what they
Yeah.
do. So yes, it seems like every single solution might be the right solution. It's
Mm-hmm.
the magic bullet. It's the shiny object. It's the thing. Well, first of all, there's never, ever, ever one solution. Like, let's get that really clear. There's always going to be a web, a puzzle, a network of things that need to happen and could happen for you to be successful. And the other thing is that, like, weighing those decisions with your values. And so I love what you said about that of like knowing your values and be clear on that versus like what other people think or what the internet tells you you should be doing. So, what are some things that you do to maybe help your clients or even yourself come back to your values when you're making those decisions?
Yeah. I'm so passionate about this, and I mean, this is what really makes how I help my clients to organize their money unique and really powerful, and speaks to preventing decision fatigue. Because if you start on the forefront by organizing your money and thinking about your decisions based on your values, and you already have a clear idea of in this season, these are my priorities and values, then it makes everything else so much easier because you've already done the hard work.
Mhm.
So practically, I help my clients to organize their entire money plan with their values at the core of it. And so not only are we having that conversation and then looking at the practical and merging those two worlds together, we're doing things like naming your buckets in your budget based on your values. And this, I think when people first hear it, they're like, "Oh, that's kind of silly," or maybe that's kind of cool, but doesn't make a huge difference. It makes the biggest difference when I
Mhm.
allow my clients to really say, "Okay, so yeah, this is your mortgage payment, but like, what does that mean to you? Why did you get this house in this neighborhood, or why did you invest at this rate?" And it's like, "Oh, well, I host my family every week, or my office space is like the dream office space at home, and it allows me to really like I've never done this much productive work in this little bit of time because I have a space I enjoy being in." And we can completely transform and name that based on their values and their reasoning for making that decision in the first place. And
Mhm.
same thing if it doesn't align with values, if we're getting into the nitty gritty of things and saying, okay, here's um, the gym membership that's $200 a month. Tell me more about that. Like, how did you get into that? What do you enjoy about it? And if they're like, well, I go, but I really don't feel great when I leave because I'm always comparing myself. And I feel like I have to, like do a full face of makeup every time I go there because it's so bougie and it just doesn't really feel like me. Of course, those things take a while to, it's not like that's right at top of mind, especially if you're still paying that membership. But it allows us to say, okay, well, maybe this goes into the like, let's keep an eye on, or like, let's find a different solution to swap of what you originally intended this to be an investment for, so that
Mhm.
it fulfills that and not what it has become, and what it's turned into, without shaming our past self or our past decisions, but just having that space to talk through these things. And that's why my clients, I love sharing the numbers of, they save $6,000 a year on average within their first year of using this system. And that's not just because we penny pinched and we found all these ways to cut back. It's, we're looking at, where do you actually enjoy spending money, and where have you been spending money that doesn't add to your life at all? And so it doesn't feel like a loss. It feels like a shift in being able to say, wow, I have 6,000 more dollars to spend how I want. I'm going to hire Ruthie right away. Like, heck yes, I've been wanting to do this, and I just didn't think I have the funds. It turns out I absolutely do, to do it 3 times
Yeah.
and go forward from there.
And when we feel good about what we're spending our money on and know that it's in alignment with our values, I can only imagine how that changes your vibration
Mm.
to attract more money to you.
Yeah.
This whole compound effect, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of my clients too, and I still grapple with this. Luckily, I've made a lot of progress here. But if spending money has not been your MO, if you've been one of those types that's like, I'm going to save, I'm going to be super smart, I'm going to make super wise decisions. One of my clients calls this part of herself Coupon Kathy, like the part of you that's really frugal and loves finding the deals. Maybe that's a value of yours, of just, it's fun to do that for you. Yes, let's keep that. And to notice the shadow side of any strength. So the shadow side of this might be that we're really hesitant to spend any money, and to start seeing when it's in alignment with your values, when it's something you genuinely want. Using like a very frivolous example, recently with me, I bought this pair of boots at the thrift store that just, I love. They're so cute. And I sent a video to my girlfriends this weekend when I had a chance to wear them. And they're like, Marin, the way that you lit up, and the fact that I'm sending a video in the first place and being like, look at the, like, it is this totally different feeling. And it was probably $30 or something so small, but spending that money and allowing yourself to spend, especially in these ways that maybe past you would have called, I don't know, like unnecessary, or just these like luxury expenses that sometimes get shame, especially if we're smart, savvy business owners, to say, no, there's so much power on that return on investment, in terms of, as you're speaking to, the energy that you then radiate, and the happiness you feel, and then you attract more of what you like, and you're a happier person to be around, and you're more confident in your business, and those ripple effects are huge. And that boots weren't a business investment, but in turn have a business return as well. Not that that's the only measuring stick, but it's just one way to show, yeah, absolutely, there is a change when it's based on, again, your values and what really lights you up, not the shoulds and the pressures of what anyone else thinks.
Yeah. And I always think about that, like time, money, of like, if I invest in this, is it going to bring me joy, which will help my energy? Is it going to give me time back that I can spend on things that bring me joy,
Mhm.
which increases my energy? Like having someone clean my house. Absolutely. 100% worth the investment. And I did a similar thing to you with the website, of like, I built a lot of my website myself. I invested in somebody to help me with a sales page. We got it done faster. It was better. I liked it more. Like, it was worth the investment. And so
Mhm.
those are the things to kind of ask yourself. And like you said, be aware of those previous shadows, those stories that we've told ourselves that are maybe guiding our decision. And is that really you talking, right?
Yeah. And I did want to come back to a point you made earlier about all the shiny objects and all the possibilities out there of any investment, personal or business. And to a great question that I've asked myself and asked my clients, if you're feeling that, if it feels like a muddy call toward something, of like, I really feel called to do this or make this, but like, if it doesn't feel like that excitement flow, there's such a difference there, but it can feel nuanced unless you're really walking through it with someone. But if there's hesitation at all, to say, like you're saying, where is this coming from? And also that question, do I think this is like the key, the ticket to my success, or the solution that's going to solve all of my problems? And if that's the mindset, probably that's not going to be the case. As we were saying earlier, one thing, yes, there are such great stories of like, when I made this, like, I just felt it in my gut, I went toward it, and it really changed the game. Like, this was the turning point in
Mhm.
personal or business, in life for me. There are absolutely those stories. And if you're coming into something, at least in my experience, when I've seen with my clients, if you're coming into it with the grip that this is like, this has to be the thing, investing in this coach, and I'm all for coaching. Obviously, I'm a coach and I hire my own coach. But like, if we think a coach is going to save us and give us all of the answers within this 6 months, then I better make my money back. In fact, I
Right.
will, because I've made that in like, that's the energy where it's like, let's take a step back for a second. Let's breathe. You
Mhm.
absolutely are permitted to make this decision and make this investment. And maybe it is, the thing, and it's worth it. But are you coming at it from a trusting, like, whatever happens is for the best energy? Or is there this really tight expectation of what has to happen in order for this to be worth it? And if
Mhm.
that's the case, potentially take a step back, breathe a little bit before going forward, because yeah, there's a whole slew of things that play into success and play into that moment
Yeah.
happening. And most likely it's not going to be one thing. And that's where I see clients get tripped up and kind of get themselves into a pickle if they put all their eggs in that one basket, and it doesn't lead to the expectation they needed to happen with that, whatever risk calculation they did at the forefront of that decision.
Yes. Yes. Oh my gosh. And I think, and we could have a whole separate conversation on like lag effect and having patience and like consistency. I mean, all of these things, because it's not ever just the one thing. And
Mhm.
just to kind of wrap it before we dive into a few of my get to know you questions that I want to have, thinking about an investment in something like social media. Obviously, that's what I help people with. I help them step away from social media. But a conversation I was having with a client recently about hiring a social media manager, and I've had this conversation with other social media managers of like, people think that we're going to make this investment, we're going to hire somebody, and 30 days later, everything's going to be perfect. It takes time. All of this stuff takes time. Just like if you were going to hire a new employee, they have to be onboarded. They have to learn the company culture. They have to understand and learn your processes and your systems. And you have to learn how to give them feedback and, coach them and develop them and support them. And so nothing is going to give you instant results. And so
Mhm.
that's another thing too to think about when you're investing is how quickly am I looking for this to work?
Mhm.
And is that a realistic expectation?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that too, I've had some really powerful conversations with clients too, even one recently where she admitted later on that she hired me with that expectation of like, okay, like, I'm going to work with Marin for 6 months, and by the first 3 months, this is going to happen.
Mhm.
And it became a really powerful coaching moment, and we were able to shift to better accommodate once that truth really came to light of, okay, what do you really need here, and what really makes sense, again, on the holistic level, not just your passion and your drive, which is beautiful, but also practically we want to make sure you're not stressing yourself and your life and your business out, to make these investments. So getting clear on where is that coming from, what part of you is that coming from. For me, it's often this impatience piece that I coach through with my coach of like, oh, but wouldn't it be so nice to have it now, and to say, okay, let's speak to that part of you, like where, or the part that's like, I'm, it can be really sneaky, like I don't actually think I'm ever going to make it or it's ever going to happen, and so I'm just going to pretend that in 30 days it is going to happen because that feels better than addressing the belief of mine or the doubt of mine that's coming in and saying it's not going to happen for you. And
Oh, and when it doesn't happen in 30 days, then we're like, "See, I knew it.
yeah.
I knew it was never gonna happen." But like, no, 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 let's unpack all of that.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yeah. And like you said, we could have a whole separate conversation, but that's another element too to bring in of investments, and that's actually a great filter to go through too of, am I expecting this to happen in 30 days? Am I expecting this to be my quick ticket thing that in a year from now, for sure, guaranteed this is going to happen? And it can be frustrating at first of like, oh, maybe it won't happen in 30 days or even in a year, or maybe it's going to take 5 years to get to the big dream that I'm really talking about. But ironically, if we lean into that of, this is going to take time, like I'm in this, and so many people are entrepreneurs for life, like this is this is not just the next year. This is not just like checking the box until it happens and then I can lean back. You've chosen this path. And so like, just lean into that. And then often results come even faster because you're able to be in that flow and you're making really smart and wise decisions because you're not expecting these things to be magic solutions. You're just figuring things out and going with the flow and looking at books in a really honest way and saying, yeah, this is what I can afford right now. And so I'm going to do this variation of what I'm eventually wanting to be bigger. But right now this makes sense. And it also just creates so much less stress because you're working with what is rather than trying to create something that isn't yet. And then also you're still making huge progress toward the goal and the vision that you're working toward because you're doing it in a way that works right now. And that allows you to continue and stay sustainable as you work toward the big goals.
Yeah, that's so true. Oh my gosh. So good. So much to think about, but
So
so good.
much.
Before we wrap up and I let you share with everybody where they can connect with you, I have a couple of fun get to know you questions for Unfiltered Friday. The first I always love to ask everybody is what is your current like go-to bingeable show that you would recommend?
Well, it was only Murders in the Building and now we're in season 3 and I don't know, it's one of those shows that I think like the first 2 seasons were so good and now we're like, I don't know if they've maybe stretched this, but that was the go-to for a while.
Okay. All right. And so then along with your bingeable show,
Mm-hmm.
what's your current bingeable snack? What are you reaching for when you're binging your show?
Oh, it's always been chocolate peanut butter ice cream. That's my go-to. Not necessarily bingeable, but a good mug of chocolate peanut butter ice cream is a good way to end any day.
All right. So then along with, because I like to talk about food and drinks all the time, I always want to know then what is your current go-to adult beverage and non-adult beverage?
There's this great, anyone in the Twin Cities, the Bar Cart Lounge is a newer place, and I actually tend toward NA drinks. They have amazing NA cocktails that are not like sugary. They're not just pure sugar, which is oftentimes what those turn into. They're so good, the complex flavors, and like they come in glasses that feel fancy. So that would be adult and NA and young. But I also, for the first time ever, had a pumpkin spice latte. I resisted it for so many years and I had it on the way to a wedding on Friday. It's good. It's really good.
You're like, okay, I understand why it's stuck around.
Yeah, it's good.
That's funny. Okay. And then last one, I love to talk about travel too. So I always want to know either a trip that you went on recently that you loved or a trip that you're planning that you're looking forward to.
Oh my gosh, you are asking this at the ideal time because we are traveling next year. In just over a week, I'll be in Cancun for a wedding. And in December, we'll be in Puerto Vallarta for another wedding. We're going to Colorado for a ski trip. And then probably most looking forward to is Greece and Ireland next summer, back to back, which is going to be, one is for a wedding. We have a lot of destination weddings. And one is a family trip that I'm very excited for in Greece.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Well, those sound amazing. Everybody will have to give you a follow on Instagram to follow along with those fun trips. But speaking of Instagram, where can people connect with you? Where do you hang out online and how can they learn more if they're interested in connecting with you?
Yes. Instagram is the place to be. That's where I hang out most. Yes and by Marin, all one word. I'm sure there will be a link somewhere. And also I wanted to give a gift to podcast listeners. If you want to continue exploring this concept of aligning your finances and all of your assets with your values and with your unique goals and preferences, then I have a financial freedom workbook that I am giving away to all podcast listeners for free. So there will be a link as well attached to this episode that will provide that resource for you.
We'll put that in the show notes. Thank you, Marin, so much for being here. This was such a good conversation. I really appreciate you.
Thank you very much. Honor to be here.